Good morning from Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador. In the spirit of reconciliation, I'm speaking to you today from the city of Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador, which is within the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. The Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Centre operates within the province of Newfoundland and Labrador in the territories of the Inuit, Mi'kmaq, and Beothuk peoples. We offer our respects to these Indigenous cultures and recognize their continued connection to the land. My name is Sharon McLennan, and I'm the director of the Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Centre at the College of the North Atlantic. I am your moderator for today's Tip of the Iceberg webinar, episode 2, and like to thank our panelists and all of our attendees today for joining today's webinar. Through our webinars and news bulletins and social media, our Tip of the Iceberg campaign takes a deep dive into the workforce innovations and the leaders that are leading those workforce innovations as they would impact Newfoundland and Labrador. And so we're very excited to be here today again. The NLWIC, as we're referred to, was established by the provincial government in 2017 at the College of the North Atlantic with the provincial mandate to provide a coordinated central point of access to engage all of our labour market stakeholders about the challenges, opportunities, and best practices in workforce development. Our goal is to promote and support the research, testing, and sharing of ideas and models of innovation and workforce development that will positively impact employability, employment, and entrepreneurship within the province's labour force, and particularly underrepresented groups. Our core activities include a stakeholder engagement, research funding, capacity building, and best practices repository for knowledge mobilization. And we have new actions that were mandated last November as part of the Way Forward Work Plan and Workforce Development, which builds on these core activities. Funding for the NLWIC is provided by the Department of Immigration, Skills and Labour under the Canada-Newfoundland Labrador Labour Market Development Agreement. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Jeff Keeping, our Media and Information Officer with NLWIC, to take us all through the webinar housekeeping. Jeff will also be managing the Q&A, which will take place after all of the panelists have finished speaking. And I invite all attendees today to send any questions along for that portion of today's webinar. So Jeff, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. So like Sharon said, my name is Jeff Keeping. I'm the Media Information Officer with the Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Centre, and I'm just going to take you through a couple of slides with regards to housekeeping for this virtual event. So first of all, your audio and video. Your video for attendees have been disabled by default. Microphones have all been muted. Please unmute your microphone when you have been identified by the host during the Q&A portion of the webinar. You can do this by pressing the spacebar and speaking. The chat window, we love to have great discussions, of course. Please feel free to use the chat feature on the right side of your screen to discuss ideas, thoughts, and make comments on the presentations. The Q&A window will be available throughout the event. Please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A window to the panelists and to the host, and we'll make every effort to ensure a response is given. So for your video, if you see for attendees, that's obviously disabled. But for panelists, if you want to turn off your camera, you can turn it off by clicking the Stop Start Video button at the bottom of your screen. For your audio, again, you can tap the space bar or hold the space bar to turn your microphone on momentarily while you speak, or you can unmute yourself by using the mute button at the bottom. And of course, I can mute as well and unmute as needed. And to use the chat window, to open the chat window, click the chat icon in the bottom right-hand corner of your window. Same for the Q&A. And you can enter your message in the chat box, and at the bottom of the screen, just click send. And of course, if you have any difficulties or technical issues during the webinar, please feel free to send me an email, jeffrey.keeping@nlwic.ca, or you can go ahead and pop a message into the chat window. I'm sure to see it. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back over to Sharon now, who will continue on with the remainder of the event.
Thank you so much, Jeff. So today's webinar features two organizations who are key labour market stakeholders and innovators in their own right in the workforce development ecosystem. The Conference Board of Canada, a valued partner of the Newfoundland and Labrador Workforce Innovation Centre, as well as the St. John's Board of Trade, one of 20 organizations leading workforce innovation research projects funded by NLWIC. But before I introduce our first speaker, I'd like to say how much we value our partnership with the Conference Board of Canada, which is really in its second year. Last year, we co-convened with the Conference Board and the Business Higher Education Roundtable the kickoff session to a national tour in our province, a national tour of the regional sounding tour of the Future Skills Centre. And we had 2 sessions in Newfoundland and Labrador, one in St. John's and one in Humber Valley. And of course, last year they weren't virtual, although we continued to build our partnership in this new environment. This year, we partnered with the Conference Board on 2 fronts. In its national project with the Business Higher Education Roundtable again between July and October to advance work integrated learning by co-convening a series of virtual stakeholder engagement and focus group sessions with Newfoundland and Labrador representatives of business, industry, post-secondary, and the public sector. In a second national regional sounding tour, the virtual RST 2.0, that's going to be taking place again as a kickoff in Newfoundland and Labrador before it goes across the nation, and that will be on December 1. Today, we'll get an update and more details from our Conference Board partners on both projects. I'd now like to introduce Stephen Higgin. Stephen is a Senior Research Associate at the Conference Board of Canada, where his research focuses on skills development and training challenges in Canada. He has a background in political science and Indigenous studies. I'll hand it over to you, Stephen, and thanks very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Sharon. I'm going to try and share a PowerPoint here. Let's just hope that that works successfully. Let me know if this comes up on your screens. And
it's great, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, very good. Thank you, Sharon. Oops, I'll get that out of your way. Here we go. Yeah, thanks so much, Sharon, for the introduction. Thanks also, Jeff, for your help getting things set up and being the tech behind the screen. It is always a pleasure to work with NLWIC. It's become very clear over the past year that NLWIC is a force to be reckoned with, clearly doing a lot of impressive work in Newfoundland and Labrador, and we're so grateful for the ongoing support and collaboration. I'm just going to give a very quick overview of what the Conference Board of Canada is all about and how we connect to the Future Skills Centre before I'll hand things off to my colleagues, Andrew and Maria, who will talk about some of the specific research that we're doing and some of the convening activities that have helped connect us with Sharon and with NLWIC. So the official description of the Conference Board of Canada is that we are the foremost independent applied research organization in Canada. And I think the independent piece is really the clutch part of that statement. It's not just something we say. What it means is that regardless of who is funding the research that we're doing, we follow the evidence to inform the conclusions that we arrive at. So we hold ourselves to academic standards. We have internal and external review processes, and we pay very careful attention to the methodology behind our research. That's not to say that we're not happy to take money from different levels of governments, post-secondary institutions, or from businesses and not-for-profits, but we do make ourselves very clear that regardless of who is funding our work, we are nonpartisan, we're strictly objective, and will never steer our research towards any preconceived notions or conclusions. And I think that approach is a big part of the reason why the Conference Board of Canada has a history going back more than 65 years. Today, the board does high-quality applied research across a range of focus areas, including healthcare, economic forecasting, Indigenous and Northern communities, and education, among others. And so I think that the reputation of the organization and the range of expertise helped position the Conference Board of Canada to be a core partner in the federally funded Future Skills Centre. This is an initiative of the federal government to help prepare Canadians for a changing labor market and gain better access to the skills training and resources that they need in all regions of the country. And so that means identifying promising initiatives and scaling them up. That also means providing seed funding for ideas that have potential to become scalable projects. And at last check, I believe there are 7 Future Skills Centre funded projects that are at play in Newfoundland and Labrador, ranging from one that's focused on using virtual reality to train truckers, and then another one that's testing whether daily bite-sized, I think 4-minute training modules can actually have an impact on safety and training for mining workers up on the northern coast of Newfoundland. So you can find out about all those projects and see when the next call for proposals, if anyone tuning in has ideas or suggestions, at our website, which is fsc-ccf.ca. The Future Skills Center is made up of the Conference Board, Ryerson University, and an evaluation firm called Blueprint. And then there's also a number of partners, including NLWIC and not to mention BHER as well, who we work with and who kind of tie into our portfolio. So we are the research and convening partner within that consortium. And at this point, we're a couple of years into the research projects that we're leading and still very much engaged in the convening activities. So in a moment, I'm going to turn things over to my colleagues who will tell you a little bit more about those things. Maria Giamarco holds a PhD in psychology and neuroscience from the University of Guelph and an HBA and MSc from McMaster University. And she has held behavioral scientist and research consultant roles in the public and not-for-profit sectors, and is originally from Mississauga, Ontario, but we don't hold that against her. And then Andrew Beeler is a senior research associate with the Future Skills team here on the education team at the Conference Board, where he leads experiential learning research activities. He's a dedicated, highly knowledgeable and detail-oriented research specialist, offering expertise in research and evaluation strategies, knowledge translation, facilitation, and community engagement. He completed his PhD in the Joint Program in Communication and Culture at York University and Ryerson University in Toronto, pardon me. And he also became a father last week, so we'll forgive him if he stifles a yawn during his presentation. I'm now going to turn things over to Andrew, who's going to kick things off and tell us about a research project that we have underway. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks so much for the intro, Steve. And very pleased to be collaborating here with Sharon and NLWIC. So Steve, do you mind pressing share on that presentation again?
Sure. So Jeff, if we're able to, maybe I'll manage the PowerPoint from behind the scenes if I can share my screen while Andrew presents.
If that works, I guess I could share it too.
Okay, there you go, guys. I should have that done for you now.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. Fantastic. So, so today I'll be talking to you about the experiential learning portfolio here at our education skills team. And what I'll be speaking about is kind of COVID-19 related aspects of research that we've undertaken both before the pandemic, and in that case, sort of rethinking some of the findings that we had before the pandemic, in light of the pandemic, and then some of the some research projects that we've been undertaken during the pandemic, and what those have to say with respect to experiential learning. So, without further ado, you can kind of click through to the next one, Steve. I'll be speaking about work-integrated learning today, so education and training that formally links a student, an academic institution, and a host organization to integrate the student's post-secondary studies with an authentic work experience. Next, so there are 9 main types of work-integrated learning identified by Cooperative and Work-Integrated Learning Canada. We'll be speaking quite a bit in the first part of this presentation about apprenticeships. And there, the student is typically starting their post-secondary studies at an employer in a traditional apprenticeship model, and then sort of linking into a post-secondary institution during the course of their placement, their program of study. And then internships, another common form, a 3-month or a 12-month internship that a student undertakes during their post-secondary studies. So there's a broad range of placement-based work-integrated learning, non-placement-based. I'll touch on some emerging models toward later in this presentation. So next slide. So Canada's apprenticeship systems, haven't been immune to the pandemic. Apprentices are being impacted in their physical and mental health and their ability to access technical training. So technical training is that and classroom-based training at a post-secondary institute. And of course, their employment. So, canceled work placements are resulting in disruptions and on-the-job learning. Canadian Apprenticeship Forum did a survey in the summer, found an employment decrease by 29 percentage points for apprentices, which was worse than for journey persons, and especially strong impacts on those level 1 apprentices. So that, equivalent to first year of an apprenticeship, those work placements were especially disrupted. Of course, there have been disruptions for post-secondary students across the board, not just apprenticeships. And one of the aspects of this is the shift in technical training to online and hybrid formats. There had been some experimentation with that before the pandemic, some major initiatives to test new, more flexible models of technical training. But that shift is really happening now. The more apprentices are moving to online for their technical training. And some of the research that we recently did as part of the Future Skills Center, touches on, speaks to this need for to better prepare students for that transition. So next slide. Despite these COVID impacts, there's strong demand for skilled tradespeople across Canada. And Canada's apprenticeship systems will need to adapt to labor market changes that have been accelerated by the pandemic, especially a more dynamic labor market and digitization, both at the post-secondary level, the panic-dodgy that we've been talking about, as well as, in terms of digitization at the firm level, virtual collaboration on the job site and so forth. So the top priorities here really, from my perspective, are reducing barriers to digital learning for apprentices and integrating a stronger focus on social and emotional skills development throughout the apprenticeship pathway. So digital and social emotional skills. So, how can we ensure apprentices complete their training and graduate with the skills they need in this new environment? We're doing some work to renew Canada's Essential Skills Framework, but unfortunately, it's still that old 1990s version that is at play when it comes to essential skills training in the trades. That's basically what's used in the curriculum across Canada, and it's a really narrow approach to digital skills. Ability to use computers, other forms of technology. We need to break that open and essentially look much more holistically at digital competencies. So we did a series of consultations just before the pandemic and in 2019, looking at what are the emerging skills that tradespeople need to adapt to future work trends in 4 major sectors: in construction, manufacturing, automotive, and food service. And digital skills were seen as the top priority at that point. I think they are even more of a priority now. There's 7 core digital competencies that tradespeople identified as essential to their ability to adapt to future work trends. So these are broad competencies: technical, information management, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving. And virtual problem solving or problem solving in digital environments is something that PIAC, the Program for Assessment of Adult Competencies, has identified as a concern, in the sense that apprentices are behind other students when it comes to virtual problem solving. But at the same time, tradespeople identify this as a really core skill. Coming out of those consultations, we identified this generational divide in digital experience. It's an aging trades workforce in Canada, and there are these huge there are differences in generational communication styles and generational work preferences between the older and the younger generation, and some of those differences can impede on-the-job learning in terms of the instruction from the journey person to the apprentice. How apprentices, whether apprentices are forthright and able to ask questions and receive answers from journey persons. So some of that generational divide has been compounded by social and technological disruption and outdated training and assessment models. There's and of course persistent structural barriers, especially related to geography and accessibility. There are concerns that we identify in this report related to rural and remote apprentices, their ability to learn these new digital skills. And I should highlight that there are some new exciting FSC related projects looking at assessment in the trades that show potential here. So if you want to see more, you can check out our report there. Next slide. So another huge issue that we have to grapple with when it comes to the post-COVID-19 world of work, of course, is this increasing labor market, dynamism. So graduates in the 5 years after graduation are more likely to be moving between jobs. How do we prepare students, apprentices for a more dynamic job market? And we know that social and emotional skills are useful for navigating job changes within and across industries. We have a couple reports looking at those social and emotional skills, in particular sectors in the food service trades and in the construction trades. So over to the next slide. For instance, in our report on social and emotional skills in the construction trades, we look at this push to engage underrepresented apprentices in the sector, and we found that actually construction trades people really see the need for stronger attention to social and emotional skills, not only to work in more diverse teams on the job site, but also to advance occupational health and safety. So some of those social emotional skills are key to occupational health and safety training, for instance, which is obviously a concern in the new environment. Over to the next slide. So we've been undertaking these consultations on work integrated learning that Sharon mentioned, so essentially these have been Canada-wide consultations. You can move on to the next one, Steve. We've been examining some of the gaps between existing and required resources to support employer participation and work integrated learning. Looking at the needs, barriers, and enablers of small and medium-sized employer participation in work integrated learning. And, so there's a big set of consultations that we did, and I'm not going to speak to, all of the results coming out of this today, but I'll speak to a couple of questions, next slide, that pertain to this post-COVID-19 world of work and training. We have looked at and responded to these questions in some forthcoming reports, looking at some of the main barriers to SME participation in Canada's WIL programs, and how can we advance quality WIL opportunities in the post-COVID-19 world of work. So I'm sure you've been following some of the reports on structural supports for small and medium-sized employers. My argument is that we need to have a stronger integration of training and skills development into those structural responses to supporting SMEs. It's been a lot of focus on liquidity support, but we need to focus more on training. So long story short, we engaged 620 stakeholders from across Canada in these consultations, 30 synchronous and asynchronous groups, 14 stakeholder meetings, stakeholders from across the country. These were virtual events. And of course, thanks so much to Sharon and NLWIC for bringing together stakeholders here in Newfoundland and Labrador. Next slide. And our other convening partners. Next slide. So, so there's huge potential to increase SME engagement in Canada's WIL programs. Before the pandemic, we knew a little bit about the barriers that small and medium-sized employers face, and particularly in some regions, Ontario. We didn't have a good Canada-wide picture of what those barriers were and how to better enable small businesses to participate, to take on and offer those experiential learning opportunities to post-secondary students. Of course, they account for 99% of employer businesses in Canada. If we're going to reach that 100% goal of ensuring that 100% of post-secondary students have access to a work experience during the first diploma or degree, we need to engage them. This challenge took on a bit of a different flavor in the post-COVID-19 world of work, with SMEs obviously concerned primarily about the impact of a second wave of COVID, with cash flow, the ability to meet rent in the next month, and multiple other business challenges. Staffing remains, it's maybe seeing slight improvement according to Canadian Federation of Independent Business, from the summer to the fall, but remains a huge concern, just staffing period. But staffing specifically for supervising and training post-secondary students was in fact identified as the main barrier when it came to participation and will. So having those staffing resources is the top barrier, but there are several others that we talk about. And owners that we spoke with, this is focus group research, so it's qualitative. This wasn't statistically significant, but owners do report engaging fewer post-secondary students in 2020 than in previous years. And they report financial constraints, difficulty transitioning to remote work, and safety concerns, as having impacted their ability to engage students in 2020. So those key barriers, staffing, financial constraints, skills gaps, and recruitment challenges, will program inflexibility and misalignment. And I could talk for hours about these barriers. They're pretty, they're serious, and they take on different nuances across Canada. I'd like to point out that we have a report coming out on some of these barriers in Atlantic Canada specifically, and some of the things that we heard there, do include staffing constraints that limit employer engagement at PSIs as well, and we get into this in our impact paper, but we heard that PSIs sometimes don't have the staffing, the resources they need to engage with post-secondary students. We also heard in Atlantic Canada that the shift to remote work is a huge challenge, and I think my next slide's about that, Steve. Digital technology and literacy, are central to onboarding students now. And, employers, hiring managers that we spoke to in Atlantic Canada feel they don't really have the resources they need to successfully onboard and to mentor students in a remote will environment. It's obviously a whole different experience supervising a student over, a video meeting or via Slack or other channels than it is, in that office environment. So we heard a lot from managers and employers who are concerned about that issue and their ability to offer that quality learning experience at their organization in that remote learning context. Moving on here, we did identify some emerging models of work integrated learning that address some of these various barriers that I've touched on today. So there's a few points to some of these emerging models. We identified basically financial support, stakeholder engagement, and program design features of these models. I'll highlight sort of on the financial level, no cost or low cost will options are obviously important to push at the moment, with some of those financial constraints that SMEs face. But also, you know, for those will options like apprenticeships, which I spoke about quite a bit in this presentation. You know, apprenticeships are a more intensive will option. They're inevitably take a few more resources to support. So for those types of work integrated learning, those longer duration placement-based forms, co-ops, apprenticeships, etc., we really need group training solutions. So we need solutions that basically bring together resources from multiple employers and support them. You know, for instance, by having students rotate across employers, by pooling resources, various consortia-based models to support those more intensive options. But you know, more flexible, shorter duration options are important here as well. We heard some great stories from co-op and career offices who are pushing online projects at the moment. You know, for instance, adapting you know, job shadowing programs to short, you know, online project based programs. You know, and that's a kind of a less resource intensive option that SME may be able to engage even with, you know, less capacity at the moment. The shared apprenticeship models, so that's a consortia-based option, of course, but you know, consortia-based options I think are viable outside of apprenticeships, other types of placement-based will. And competitions and events, right? So we have Canada Comeback Challenge with the Business and Higher Education Roundtable, you know, running at the moment, and really responding to Canada's COVID-19 crisis. So you know, that type of model is very, very cost effective and allows students to participate in identifying solutions for businesses in the current environment. And you know, just also a shout out there to our other Atlantic Canada partner, one of our others, Future NB, and their Catalyst program, which is engaging post-secondary students as consultants to help small and medium-sized employers in Atlantic Canada. So a really great program. So a few of the kind of insights related to some recent reports and consultations. You can learn more about these. We have, I'd like to particularly point out, we have a summary report on our consultations in Atlantic Canada undertaken with NLWIC and Future NB and Centre for Employment Innovation. So we highlight some of the specific findings from those consultations in a forthcoming report. And then we have this Will in a Post-COVID-19 World of Work. The title may change there, but yeah, that report addresses some of these larger issues with SME participation, and then we have the 4 rising skill issue briefings coming out soon, and these relate to future of work. And like I say, the data was collected prior to the pandemic, but a lot of the findings in there are really pertinent, you know, especially related to digital learning. And I mentioned the bridging generational divides impact paper there. So some recent projects related to pandemic, and looking forward to chatting with all of you further about these.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And over to you now, Maria.
Awesome. I guess we'll wait for questions for both Andrew and myself.
Yes, please. Okay, yes.
Perfect. All right. Thank you so much, Sharon and Jeff, for inviting me here today. And thank you, Andrew, for the introduction. Or sorry, Steve, for the introduction. And I promise you all that being from Mississauga is, I hope, the least exciting thing about me. So I'm happy to talk to you all today about the Regional Sounding Tour. Steve and I were so lucky to be facilitators on almost every one of the tour stops for the first round. And if we weren't already, great colleagues and friends beforehand, we definitely were after traveling the country together and testing out as many local breweries as possible. We even got matching shirts from the Kitty Bitty Brewery. That's a fond memory of ours. So back to the Regional Sounding Tour. So the RST really fits into 2 key pillars of the Future Skills Center, which are knowledge mobilization and stakeholder relations. And these are really integral to ensuring that our work is meaningful and impactful. In the first round of the RST and also the upcoming second round, these both sort of reflect a commitment to engaging with diverse stakeholders across the country to ensure that the work we're doing for the Future Skills Center is inclusive and collaborative. And through all of this and the research under FSC, we're working to make sure that what we do has impact, gets into the hands of the people who can benefit from the outcomes of the work that we're doing. And so to do this, we're enacting also a variety of knowledge mobilization activities. So this is essentially just finding diverse and varied ways, user-friendly ways to share and communicate updates, research, information about our work, using sort of different targeted channels that meet the needs of stakeholders. And the Future Skills Center was built intentionally as a pan-Canadian organization, but we very much recognize that, saying that we're pan-Canadian and actually being pan-Canadian are two different things. So the RSC has had a big role in helping us really build out this collaborative pan-Canadian network of skills stakeholders and initiatives that will help drive and build solutions that can benefit Canadians, skill stakeholders from coast to coast to coast, and that are truly regionally driven and led by regional partners in collaboration with regional partners. And so the RST has been this great opportunity for us to get out and to be able to speak directly with the people who know the most about this space in their own communities. And of course, the nature of the RST has to change in the second round, given the realities of COVID and virtual convening. But we're really grateful to have had the opportunity to build the foundations by physically traveling to every region and engaging with communities. And so the first round, we made stops in every province and territory towards the end of 2019 and early 2020. And the events essentially bring together skills stakeholders, so people interested in or working in education, employment, skills, training, to hear about their main challenges and how, if at all, skills fit into their strategic priorities, either in the region writ large or in their own organization, and specifically how the Future Skills Center can be responsive to these regionally diverse needs through the work that we do, the research, the community, et cetera. And so in each of the stops, we asked several questions, the same questions to every group, and these focused primarily on as I mentioned, skills, education, and development challenges that are specific to the region, community, or organization that participants were representing, as well as their perspectives on the skills needed for career success in their line of work, skills gaps that exist. We also focused a lot on specific challenges and opportunities for vulnerable groups in marginalized communities, and ask for examples of initiatives and programs that already exist that are doing great work that perhaps the Future Skills Center could amplify or further support. So this was also a really great opportunity as researchers to collect data from across Canada as well. So to capture these conversations and to use them to help us build out partner projects, to help shape the themes of the calls for proposals from the Future Skills Center for innovation projects, and to drive the research that we're doing at Conference Board on behalf of a Future Skills Center, to again make sure it's more reflective of sort of pan-Canadian needs and perspectives. And there's a couple examples I'll speak to real quickly of innovation projects funded by the Future Skills Center in Atlantic Canada, just to help make things a bit more concrete. So one example comes from Memorial University. So there's what's called the Fusion Network project that involves 1,500 students with the goal to bridge gaps between the skills students are taught and what employers need. There's another example, which is the Trucking Human Resource Sector Council Atlantic, and we always make fun of how much of a mouthful the name is for that one, but it's a fantastic project that's looking at testing and evaluating first of its kind reality training, virtual reality training, I should say, to at least 150 professional drivers across Atlantic Canada to help them prepare for the changing nature of work. So these are just a couple examples of the projects that are funded through FSC and that we hope to continue to build out through the RST, through building those connections with stakeholders across the country. And so we're very grateful to everyone who has participated so far in the events to be able to hear from folks and really listen to what's happening in communities across Canada and how and where the Future Skills Center can support and collaborate. So it's really about letting the regions guide us and tell us what they need from us. And we've been so lucky to build partnerships with organizations like NLWIC, who have been so supportive and so wonderful to us. And we'd be lying if we said we didn't have a ton of fun, of course, during round 1 of the RST as well. So the first round and now the second one kicked off in Newfoundland, and I think it really set the bar high for the sounding tour. So the pictures you see on the screen, I'm sure most of you recognize, that's the St. John's Harbor in the back. We also got to go to the Humber Valley and make a quick stop in Corner Brook, which was awesome. There's some more photos here of us just sort of traveling around. The travel did start to wear us down a little bit. On the left here, we're at the Deer Lake Airport. On the right, this is just a snowy flight to Sudbury. But next slide, Steve. We got to meet so many fantastic community leaders, and we were always welcomed with open arms, no matter where we went. On the left, we're at College Boreal with their president and the mayor of Sudbury. And then on the right was the final stop that we got to do in person in Iqaluit, and we're here at Nunavut Arctic College on the right. All right, so I'm going to speak as well to sort of the findings from the first RST. What we learned, I'll speak specifically first to Newfoundland and then talk about Atlantic Canada a bit more broadly. And I'll just note that the findings that we gleaned from the stops in Newfoundland tie in very well and sort of complement the findings that have been coming out of the experiential learning project that Andrew just spoke to as well. So one of the major themes we saw in the conversations was around rural challenges. So things like limited opportunities for folks in rural communities, reliance or over-reliance on seasonal labor, distances to job sites, lack of public transportation. So all of these kind of challenges rolled into one and how they impact access to the labor market, and challenges around folks having to leave their communities to pursue education in urban centers, and the challenges, these challenges are exacerbated by sort of the affordability or the cost of living in urban centers where most post-secondary schools are and where a lot of jobs are. And also from a well-being perspective, this is a big challenge for folks, maintaining connections to community and to family. And we heard a lot about needing to meet people where they are in their communities, to bring opportunities into communities rather than always expecting people to leave and to pull them out of those communities. We heard a lot about challenges with basic literacy. So things like reading, basic mathematics, as well as digital literacy. And on top of this, we heard a lot about sort of the growing demand for other types of human or social and emotional skills that are difficult to teach and measure, like communication and problem solving. A big theme within Newfoundland, as well as most of Atlantic Canada, were concerns around the aging workforce, particularly around how to prevent brain drain from happening in the provinces. So as folks are retiring, how do we ensure that there's enough retention of youth to fill job vacancies, and also on the other side of things, making sure that we're supporting mid-career, late career workers that are looking to upskill, re-enter the workforce, maybe come back after retirement, that sort of thing, and focusing on appropriate supports for skills and digital literacy and these types of things. Finally, another huge theme in the conversations was the need for better and more targeted supports for vulnerable populations. So there's a need to engage and support youth, Indigenous populations, and newcomer talent. And there was a lot of emphasis on sort of wraparound supports and fulfilling basic needs like housing, mental health, support with substance use, training, etc. So for folks who are interested in reading a bit more specifically about the findings from the 2 stops that we made in Newfoundland, you can check out these links here. Even if you just Google sort of the Regional Sounding Tour Future Skills Center, you'll see all sort of the report backs on our website. So you can, look at how things compare to other parts of Atlantic Canada or the rest of the country as well. And, as I mentioned, there were a lot of themes that were sort of prominent across Atlantic Canada as well. Things like the urban-rural divides, the need for more inclusive approaches, engaging vulnerable communities and marginalized communities to address labor shortages. These were big themes that we saw, not just in Newfoundland, but across the provinces in Atlantic Canada. And one thing that we did note that was
Maria.
Yep.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. Just I think Andrew and I ate into your time a little bit, and I want to make sure we have enough time for Lori too. So we'll just have to wrap up quickly.
Okay, so I'm going to jump ahead then to 2.0 real quick. And just quickly say, we're really excited about the second round. Of course, a big focus of the second round is going to be what are the sort of continuations in the challenges and some of the differences that have come up in light of COVID. COVID has exacerbated a lot of the barriers and the challenges that we saw in the first round. We'll also in these conversations start to look at how do we start to address these challenges, especially with this COVID lens on things. So I will leave things there.
Thank you so much, Maria.
To attend the Newfoundland and Labrador event is on the screen. And if you have any questions, please feel free to get in touch.
Thank you to the Conference Board of Canada. We obviously need to get you back as well. There's a lot happening, and I really appreciate it. And in fact, at the talk about the aging workforce and generational divide, I guess it's a good segue into Lori Shepherd. Lori, we're delighted to have the opportunity to work with Lori. She's a project manager, and she works with the St. John's Board of Trade, where she currently manages a project funded by NLWIC, researching the barriers to employment that exist for older workers in Newfoundland and Labrador, and developing a program that addresses these barriers. We're very excited having her here to give an update and an overview. She holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Memorial University, has a diverse career managing projects for energy, telecommunications, and medical software industries. So, Lori, I know your time is a little bit, and we may not have time for questions, but let's move forward, and we'll get you back as well, maybe with some of our other projects. So, go ahead, Lori.
Thank you. Just going to go ahead and share my PowerPoint application. Okay, can you folks see my screen?
There we go. Yes.
All right. Okay, so
Great.
Since November or October of 2019, the Board of Trade has been working on a project funded by NLWIC called Research on Barriers and Opportunities to Workforce Participation for Older Workers in Newfoundland and Labrador. So we are leading that program, but it is funded by NLWIC. So just as a bit of background, the Board of Trade is always looking for ways to find groups of people and develop programs for them that will help address perceived labor shortages that are going to be coming up over the next few years. So we've looked at immigration, we've looked at students, we've looked at repatriation. But one of the things that hasn't really been examined is the role that the older Newfoundland and Labrador worker could play in filling some of these labor shortages. Now, for the purposes of this exercise, we're calling older workers anyone between 55 and 74, regardless of their background, regardless of their experience. So that's the term that we're going to be using. So in the fall, once they hired me as project manager, we engaged with MQO Research to look into some of the issues, primarily the barriers to employment for workers aged 55 plus, and what opportunities we may be able to have to overcome those barriers. The project has two phases. Phase one, which was the research and developing a program based on that research. And phase two, which we're getting ready to enter into in 2021, which is the delivery of the program. The research examined three fundamental questions. One, what is the approximate size of the labor pool of Newfoundland and Labrador residents over 55 who would return to work if they were offered an appropriate job? Question two, what are the barriers to employment facing older workers in the province? And three, what are the opportunities or what can we do to overcome these barriers? So for the research phase, MQO delivered two reports to us. In February, they delivered their report on barriers and opportunities, and this was based on a literature review, an interview with 400 residents of the province, and focus group. In April 2020, we received the results back from the employers survey, And that was done with, I believe, 89 employers, Board of Trade members, and employers from across the province. And we were looking at their attitudes towards older workers. In addition to this formal research, we've been doing our own additional research, including an engagement with Older Workers NL, which is an advocacy group that has been acting in an advisory role. They've been very instrumental in giving me information about what it's like to actually be an older worker in Newfoundland. I've been doing my own investigation of training and employment services that we could be used in our program for older workers. This past month, I attended a 3-series webinar series on employment issues unique to older workers. I'm hoping to be able to share that research as part of this program because it was very valuable and very enlightening. And again, as we go along, I'm continuing to do research to support our findings. So the first question we wanted to ask is, how big is the potential labor pool of older workers in Newfoundland and Labrador? So again, we did a telephone survey of 400 residents in the province. And no surprise, residents in the 55 plus age group were less than half as likely to have paid employment as citizens, the other respondents in the other two groups. So amongst respondents who are not actively seeking paid employment over the age of 55, 80% say they had no desire to work or they were retired. 12% they didn't want to go back to work for health issues. 5% they were too old. 3% had other reasons for not seeking paid employment. So when we got down to it, we asked, would you accept an appealing job offer if it was offered to you? 65% said no, they would not, for the reasons previously mentioned, presumably. 5% said they didn't know, but 29% said yes. If an appropriate job offer was offered to them, they would go back into the workforce. So if we take that 29% and we expand it out over to the 149,000 individuals in Newfoundland and Labrador between 55 and 70, a labor pool of 43,000 people in Newfoundland and Labrador over the age of 55 who would go back to work if an acceptable job was offered to them. So that answered our first question. The next question was, what are the barriers to employment that older workers are experiencing? The first one that came up, and this one came up in pretty much all the literature I read, and that is workplace inflexibility. As people age, they may prefer to work part-time or gradually sort of draw down as they reach retirement age. They're no longer interested in having a full-time 9 to 5 in the office job. Flexible hours, they would prefer to work weekends or evenings or what have you. The reasons for this, there were many. Their own health issues, having to care for spouses or parents or children at home. This may make more remote work or part-time work more appealing and more feasible for older people. The desire to spend time doing other things, such as attending to their own hobbies, traveling, that might make full-time work undesirable for many older people as well. Employers may not want to provide these arrangements, these flexible arrangements for workers, if there's an additional cost or if it's causing them scheduling challenges or what have you. So rigidity of working arrangements may be forcing people out of the workplace before they want to go, or be applying for new positions on the assumption that they're going to apply for a job that's going to be inflexible to them. The second barrier we identified was a skills mismatch. Older workers have not been exposed to digital technologies to the extent that younger workers have, and that's true everywhere. And this may, I say may because it's not hard and fast, put them at a disadvantage when seeking employment. What this may also do is adversely affect the confidence of older workers, particularly if they haven't been in the workforce for a while or they have not had a lot of experience using computers. They may feel that the workplace has changed too much for them to want to participate. The perceived lack of skill makes them feel unwanted. Third barrier we found, lack of employment services that are tailored to older workers. Employment services as they exist now may not meet their needs. The resume that an older person has should emphasize their skills rather than their years. You don't want a 5-10-page resume with, that dates back 40 years. That's not going to give the employer the nutshell view that they need to see of you. So they need help crafting that resume that is skills-based rather than chronological. The types of jobs that they're seeking, again, these flexible, temporary, part-time, home-based jobs, may not be reflected in job databases. They may be unfamiliar with online job application processes, and the traditional job search techniques that they do use, newspaper ads, cold calling, off resumes at somebody's front door, they're not as effective as they once were. And job advertisements may be written in a way that is a deterrent to older workers, people looking for rock stars and digital natives and dynamic person with 5 years experience. I wouldn't apply for those jobs, and I have a feeling a lot of other older people wouldn't as well. And the fourth barrier, perceived ageism was identified in the focus group participants as being a major barrier to employment. Our participants felt employers tend to place yet less value on their work and on their life experience compared to younger workers, and that young people are perceived to be better at the job due to them be able to learn quickly and adapt to new technologies faster. Participants mentioned employers believe older workers are not interested in receiving new training and that they are better off training younger workers as they'll be in the workforce longer. And as I proved with my research, at age be a very, very big factor in what we found out. And I assume I'm very happy to say the employee survey findings were very counter to this. Among the employers we surveyed in the province, 75.3% had at least one older worker employed, and 36% had employed an older worker in the last 12 months. Most respondents had very positive views of older workers. They found them to be more experienced than their younger counterparts. And when asked what would make the workplace a good fit for an older worker, again, they referenced experience and knowledge and reliability as being the features that older workers had. 82.6% agreed that experience was more important than education when hiring. 60.5% of respondents stated they would be highly likely to hire an older worker if there was a new vacant position. Again, the experience and the reliability is the reason for that. When asked what challenges they perceived around hiring older workers, it centered largely around the physical demands of the job, older people not being able to do the same job physically as a 25 or a 30-year-old could be, or they're being unfamiliar with new technologies that were being used in the workplace. Most respondents didn't identify any specific efforts made by their workplace to support older workers while recruiting. The general views about older workers were largely positive, specifically, again, they found them dependable, hardworking, and knowledgeable. And finally, although the results show that there's very little being done by workplaces to actively recruit and support older workers, most respondents agree it would be worthwhile to invest in older workers. So,
Laura, sorry, Laura, I'm not going to cut you off. I'm going to ask that if people need to leave at 12, that's fine. But this is very, your presentation is excellent, as have the other ones been. So I'd love to continue if ever, anyone who can. It would be great if you could stay on and so Laura can finish your presentation if that works for people. Thank you.
Thank you. So as my research continued, one of the things that became apparent to me when speaking with older people and the perceptions of the workplace is a lack of confidence that retired who want to go back to the workplace feel. And that is something that any program will have to address. That's that perception of ageism, that perception of their own limitations with technology, the general sense that the workforce has passed them by and it's too different for them to go back. So this is something that our program needs to counteract. So any program will have to address this by being as supportive of the participants as possible. Some ideas I had for that would be to hold one-on-one regular meetings with facilitators. So once they've entered into the program, meet with me regularly to see how they're doing. Have opportunities for them to meet with older workers and provide education and training that will boost their confidence and make them more employable. So out of all of this research comes what we want to call the Experienced Workers Program. The Board of Trade will be launching this program in the new year based on the results of our research. Beginning in early January, we're going to be looking for participants for our program using traditional and social media. The initial pilot will be a small group of participants to better determine what's working and what's not and be able to adjust it going forward. And the pilot will run for 2 months, after which we'll make the necessary tweaks and then roll it out to a larger group. The program goals for workers. So after participating in the program, participants should have a solid resume that reflects their skills and experience, the ability to craft a solid cover letter, an understanding of how to search and apply for jobs online, improved employability skills, a better sense of their own skills and their own talents, regardless of their job experience, a better understanding of their value to the job market in Newfoundland, and connection to potential employers. The program goals for employers who enter into this program: after participating, they should have a better understanding of the potential of older workers and their contribution to the Newfoundland workforce and their workplace, an understanding of how to craft job ads and create workplaces that are more inclusive of older workers, and a connection to a pool of experienced, mature potential employees. The intake process for this is to determine what supports participants need to be ready. The only criteria for entering my program is you have to be 55 years old. So some of these folks will have just left careers. They'll have a great resume. They'll have a job search. They'll know the tech skills. They'll know the interview skills. I can probably just put them right in my employer pool and be done with it. Some won't. Some will require a lot more hand-holding, for lack of a better word, a lot more support to get them to that point where they can be put into that pool of potential employees. So participants will do an intake form followed by an interview with me. The intake process will determine what training and what supports this person needs to be successful, and we will direct them to those supports. So some of the identified resources that I have found is Techno Tutors. They offer courses in basic digital literacy, and they've agreed to work with me on this, as has the Murphy Center, who provide one-on-one job readiness training. Skills Pass NL, this might be very helpful if people need to do this online, if they can't do person-to-person. It's offered by the provincial government, and it's a series of online, no-cost job readiness courses. This program has the added advantage of allowing progress. So I could set up a group of participants, tell them I need you to do this, this, and this course, and then I could see when they've done it. Lastly, Skills Canada NL and ABC Life Literacy Canada will be partnering with the Board of Trade to deliver ABC's Youth Teaching Adults program. I've been talking with Skills Canada NL for a while, and I have been engaging with ABC for quite some time, both wonderful organizations. Skills Canada has a group of youth that they want to train to teach older adults digital skills. That one-on-one mentorship benefits them both. I think that has tremendous potential to be a really good program. In addition to the participant-specific job readiness preparation that we just talked about, I would strongly encourage all participants to attend a series of employability skills seminars. The Board of Trade, again, have partners with ABC Life Literacy Canada to deliver seminars from their Activate Learning program. Now, the Activate Learning program was developed specifically for learners in Newfoundland and Labrador. I met with their coordinator 2 weeks ago, and we have created a selection of courses that we think will best serve this group of people. So in attending these courses, in addition to enhancing their employability skills, participants will get to benefit from regular connection with older workers and regular discussion of the issues that they may be having as a group. So the employability skills that have been suggested for older workers to take is a course on teamwork, stress management, confidence, continuous learning, adaptability, motivation, writing. Now, this isn't how to write. This is enhancing your writing skills. And spending plans. We put that in there because a lot of people have to go back to work after retirement because they can't afford retirement. They can't afford to retire. So getting some money management skills would do them well. So to promote awareness of all of the issues around older workers for employers and employees, we have worked with a company here in town called Perfect Day. They've developed a wonderful social media campaign that's going to drive people to our website. The website will contain information on how to contact the program, how to intake into the program. It will contain links to our research and other relevant research, resources for employers on how to attract and retain older workers, as well as the advantages of adding them to the workforce. It will have blog posts and articles on issues relating to seniors' employment, and it will contain the employee pool for potential employers to find older workers who fit their needs. So while I always stress to people that this is not an employment program, I am not here to get anybody a job. We're the Board of Trade, and we do have connections into groups of people who may be hiring. Research indicates that employers find it more difficult to fill jobs that are part-time, temporary, seasonal. And as we saw earlier, these are the types of flexible jobs that retirees and older unemployed people are often looking for. The Board of Trade has an access to a large pool of business contacts that we can leverage to help workers find employment. Obviously, we do this for all of our participants who were ready to be added to that pool, even if they were looking for a full-time permanent job. It's not just for temporary seasonal work. Once participants have met the criteria to do so, again, their resume is tight, their job skills are tight, they're ready to go, we add them to the pool. Employers go into the pool and hopefully select candidates that will fill their available jobs. It will contain descriptions of the candidates, brief summaries of their qualifications, and their availability. Employers could contact the program or the participants directly. The program facilitator, and for all intents and purposes right now, me, would not encourage or discourage employers from a particular candidate. Building the relationship is the responsibility of the employer and the employee. So the next steps for my program, the website and the social media launch will be January of 2021, at which point I will begin registering people for the pilot. I anticipate the pilot should be about 20 people. We're going to launch once we have our people in February 21, run the program for 2 months, do the evaluation in April, and once it's tweaked and ready to go out to the larger group, May of 2021. So if you have any questions or if you want more information, my contact information is right here. Thank you very much for your time and for having me present here today.
Thank you so much, Lori, and thank you again to all of the conference board team. Jeff, I was wondering, have you received any questions in the Q&A portion of the webinar?
No, we have not. We have not received any questions in the Q&A portion.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to just open it up to the panel if they have any questions of each other.
Maybe I'll just,
yeah, go ahead.
I'll just quickly comment to say that's a fantastic program, Lori, and it actually responds very well to some of what Maria pointed out about what we learned when we met with people in both St. John's and in Corner Brook, that the aging demographic was a huge concern, but that there was this kind of untapped labor pool, and it was just a matter of connecting people who wanted to work with some of the opportunities that were out there. So it's really great to see that there's a program being put into action that responds directly to what we heard. I think that bodes really well, and I'll be very curious to hear how the pilot goes and see what the results are. So kudos to you.
I'm hoping to be delighted to share those results. I think there's enough desire out here, and I think there's enough people interested that once we get it out to the general population, they're going to love it. I really do. I really believe that because I know there's a need for it here.
Yeah. To your point, Stephen, that was a good comment. I mean, we have, and maybe it's even accelerated here, but again, declining population is shrinking traditional labor pool. But what the research projects that we have funded to date are looking, a lot of them are looking at how do we increase the participation rates of underrepresented groups to become a new broader talent pool. And so it's interesting. Even this particular project is a great, I think, a template or a model maybe of how we might look at other underrepresented groups to really, because, specifically about how with the program as well as the research. So looking forward to, again, the results. So thank you. Any other comments or questions from anyone in the online? I have
Andrew is
Oh, go ahead.
speaking, but he's
Yes.
muted, I think.
Okay, go ahead, Andrew.
About that. Thanks for your presentation, Lori. I'm excited to see the results as well. I was wondering, with your program design or coming out of any of the conversations with employers, whether there are particular sectors or industries that would be sort of more amenable to giving the kind of flexibility, like workplace flexibility that older workers seem to need.
Right now, the ones that I've spoken to, it's mostly in retail because they do have shift work and they do have seasonal work. I dare say there's probably more employers, and I think once we get rolling and the employers that we have see that this is an opportunity for them, then I'll get more of a sense of what other types of employers would want to hire these types of folks. I think there's a lot of them out there. It just maybe never occurs to them.
Right. Yeah, fair enough. And I'll be curious to see what the next stage reveals in terms of what kinds of accommodations employers are willing to make for older workers in your province. Retail, certainly I could see that being a potential industry, but then of course it's tends to be a low wage industry as well. So I'd be curious to see whether that's a desired sort of pathway for older workers.
Yes, it will be for some because a lot of them just want the social aspect. They want a few dollars in their pocket. They just want to go and hang out, go out, be around people, make a few dollars. They don't necessarily need the money to live. Now, some of them do. And that's again, one of the things that I would want to determine on intake is, okay, what do you want out of this? Is this something you want for just almost a pay kind of thing? Or do you really need to go back to work and work 40 hours a week to support your family? Because that's going to send them down two different paths for sure.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Looking forward to hearing about the next stage.
Thank you so much, Andrew.
I'm looking forward to getting on with the next stage.
Hi, can I just interrupt here for a second, folks? I'm sorry to cut in. Mike Keogh is asking to be unmuted so he can ask a question. So, Mike, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you for a moment, and you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay,
thank you, Jeff. Yep, thank you, Jeff. First of all, I want to thank the presenters this morning, and Maria and Andrew. And Lori, of course. I chair Older Workers Newfoundland and Labrador, and delighted to participate with Lori and the Board of Trade on this. And it's just excellent work that she's been doing. And she's been a real a pit bull with the project and making it work. Thank you, Lori, for that very much. Andrew and Maria, in your work in Newfoundland and Labrador, congratulations on the partnership with Workforce Innovation Centre. They truly are a force here in all aspects of what we're doing. They've been a great support to the older workers end of it that we've been working on and advocating for and working to remove barriers and improve opportunities. But I noticed in your presentation, your visits were to, by our standards, urban centers, and it seemed to reflect urban thinking. For example, I think a large part of our population are rural and more so, like the apprenticeship program is great. You spoke about trades and construction, but I noticed an absence of the fishing industry in particular. Now, I don't want to drill down on that in particular too much, but Andrew or Maria, perhaps you can comment on it. That industry is crying for people in it. They're aging. The apprenticeship programs are antiquated, they're outdated, they're restrictive. And they don't seem to have any kind of a worthwhile technology thing to make it work. So I'm wondering if you're looking at that, or if you have looked at that, or if you're going to be looking at that, And perhaps either of you, whoever that would more fall into your bailiwick, and I look forward to getting a copy of your presentation after. It's a lot of information for the untrained like me. It's like stepping into a house where each room is full of information, and I'm trying to make up my mind which room to go into. So thank you very much. Perhaps you can make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. And I guess, Andrew, did you have a comment on that? And then we'll probably wind down unless there are any other questions. Go ahead.
So the short answer is that we haven't studied the fishing industry. So we looked at in the apprenticeship consultations. We looked at the 4 major skilled trade sectors. So it's construction, manufacturing, motive power, and food service trades. Food service, largely a cook and baker. There are a large number of trades across Canada that are more specific to certain jurisdictions, and our consultations focus more on the Canada-wide trades, so those that are part of the Red Seal program. So, for instance, carpenter, welder, etc. So, a short answer is I don't have any response to that. I would be keen to study that. Sounds like a fascinating workforce development challenge.
Thank you, Andrew. So,
Thank you.
Go ahead. Any final words? Lori, were you going to say something?
Sharon, I was just going to add from the perspective of
Maria, thank you. I thought you were gone. Excellent. Go ahead. No, great. Go.
So just very quickly, I know we didn't speak to industry-specific challenges in this very brief presentation, but the fishing industry did come up in the conversations for Newfoundland, and I do appreciate your feedback around where the stops actually are and how that changes the nature of the data that we collect, of course. We tried our best to bring in sort of rural perspectives into the events, but of course there's a number of logistics challenges there. And so we do have our eye on, in the future, engaging more folks from rural areas. But going back sort of to the industry question, this was, these key challenges around the aging workforce, the urban-rural divide. A lot of this did come up in the context of the fishing industry in Newfoundland as well. So I will just quickly say that. I know the details weren't in the slides, and we might not get that specific even in the report backs, but we are happy to continue the conversation and perhaps even dig into some of those insights that we got sort of in the transcripts of the conversation in Newfoundland. So thank you.
That's great, Maria. Thank you for that comment on that. It's interesting, though, with COVID and now everything virtual, we really have a big opportunity, to Mike's point and to your point, and for all of us to expand, I guess, our audiences to include as many rural as possible, particularly where broadband is not an issue, and that's even starting to get addressed. So, yeah, I think that's really good, and I guess it's food for thought. That's the nice thing about these kinds of events and listening to each other. It starts those conversations. So thank you very much. Any final comments before I close? Because I wish we could go on. And in fact, it's a good learning here. We probably need longer
Hi, Sharon.
For this. Yes.
Hi, yeah, there is a comment in the Q&A section. It's a comment, that doesn't need a response, but it's from Trudy Button. It's for Lori. Good. Yeah, it says, excellent program, Lori. Some of the barriers you identified for the 55 plus people in seeking employment are also barriers faced by the 40 to 54. This group is often left out of discussions about job search. I would love to see it tailored for the 40 plus group also. So that's for you, Lori. So something to consider. And on that note, that's all that we have in the Q&A and chat.
Yeah, great. Well, actually, that's a couple of ideas maybe for potential new research and collaborations for both for NLWIC to maybe encourage, and we could talk further with our partners and collaborators like the Conference for Future Skills, or to encourage some work around that area. So stay tuned for that. I just want to say on behalf of the whole NLWIC team, and thank you, Jeff, for your work on this today, and thank all the panelists and those who attended. Really appreciate your participation. I am sorry that the time went over, and that has nothing to do with the panelists. I think we need to expand our time for the rich conversations and information that we really want to be able to dig deeper and dive deeper on in these sessions. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it. This has been recorded. We'll be making sure that we promote this as much as possible, and we hope that you'll join us again in the future in this or other collaborations. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a great day and stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
See you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.